with both hands. I gotta feel the kick inside. Oh, fire. Ain't nobody living in a perfect world. Everybody's out there crying to be heard. But I got a new fire burning in my heart, lighting up the darkness and moving like a meteorite. Oh, fire. When everything just falls in line, we live and learn from our mistakes. The deepest cuts are in our place. Now I believe there comes a time when everything just falls in line. We live and learn from our mistakes. The deepest cuts are in our face. Now I believe there comes a time when everything just falls in line. We live and learn from our mistakes. The deepest cuts are healed by faith. Now I believe. Oh, fire. Oh, fire. Oh, fire. Oh, fire, fire, fire. Now I believe there comes a time when everything just falls in line. We live and learn from our mistakes. The deepest cuts are healed by faith.
Hi, welcome to ReneMarie Stroke of Luck. I'm ReneMarie, and of course we have our co-host Judy Marlowe. Hi, Judy. How are you?
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning. And we really have the pleasure of having a special guest on the show today. Her name is Charlotte Ambrose. We were connected with Charlotte through Ginny. Ginny was in a pageant in Las Vegas, which we'll hear a little bit about as soon as we ask Charlotte. But Ginny found out Charlotte's story with her husband. Her husband suffered a stroke. And the wonderful tie is that he was a passionate softball player. And everybody knows that softball is one of the big life lessons in my life as I was playing. It's such games and sports are so important to teach people, to teach children and adults as well, how to focus, how to win and lose, how gracefully. There's so many life lessons that could be learned from softball. So I think it's very wonderful that we have a guest on the show that her husband was as passionate. He was also a radio personality, which we'll hear a little bit about. But what I loved about Charlotte was she did a video for us 2 years ago for our telethon. And we're gonna, Jim, do you have that ready to roll? Okay, I think we're gonna show that first so that we could really get a feel for the story behind it. It really is. And what I love about Charlotte is her grace and her poise and the way that she speaks. I personally love the way she speaks because she speaks in a slow, personal tone that really touches your heart. It really touches your heart. Waiting to see this video. And we're going to come up on 2 years of celebrating Tom's passing December 1st, 2018. Before we get to the video, though, I want to welcome you, Charlotte. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So we'll get into the story, but I would like for Jim to run that video so that we could really remind us of how the story and the love story that they had together. So Jim, roll it.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Werner Ambrose. I'm currently Miss Super Senior Poland Universe, and I'm here to discuss the effects of a stroke. My husband, who was a corpsman in the Korean War, he was very active as a senior softball player, and he began to lose his balance on the ball field, and we couldn't figure out what the connection was. And because of that, he had to use the walker and eventually was falling and hurting himself. Our family was devastated.
What age was that?
At age 68, even though he was still playing that senior softball, that was his life's enjoyment, and he began to feel depressed that he could not be stable, and he was losing that balance on the field, walking, daily living, and we traveled to many, many places to figure out what the problem was.
Yeah, that's good. What were the warning signs that alerted you to a stroke of this condition?
Eventually what happened after trying to seek some answers, Tom came home and he was a radio announcer whose diction was perfect. He could not utter a complete sentence. I was looking down when I heard a sentence come out of his mouth, and I asked him, "Please repeat that. What'd you say?" And I recognized that he needed help, and it was a symptom of a stroke. So we quickly went to the emergency room of the hospitals, and even then they couldn't figure out the reason, which was extremely upsetting. And 6 months later he had another stroke, which I had to call the ambulance at that point, since he collapsed on the floor and was in a fetal position. And finally the advanced radiologist discovered it was the basilar artery up the back of the neck that caused the imbalance. The cerebellum was not getting a blood supply, and no one connected that. Tom kept saying, "I'm fine if I'm sitting. As soon as I move, I know there's a problem." They kept telling him he was old, which he was, but his ball player friends didn't have that problem. And eventually we figured out that it was a stroke. So if your loved ones are telling you that they're having trouble with balance And with movement, please ask them to check that basilar artery up the back of the neck, because that's where the problem is.
Anything else you'd like to talk about the overall experience that most people wouldn't know about?
I think the overall experience of it was frustration, totally, because even though he was given advice of pills, take this pill, and if it gets worse, come back, it ruined, for a year, Tom was devastated. He went into a depression. I tried to find another soldier to talk to him, to allow him to express his feelings to somebody. And eventually, of course, it ended up where he did fall, which was a worry of mine. He was on blood thinners and suffered a brain bleed. So it seemed like it was a domino effect. But if only they would have checked that basilar artery, he could have enjoyed the last 5 years of his life, even more so. So please be alert, be aware. If someone is acting a little strange or has difficulty in doing the normal, everyday chores, seek help immediately.
That's very good. Anything else you want to say about the telethon or to the telethon?
I am extremely happy that a telethon is warning the public. The public needs to be aware. This is such a devastating happening, but it can happen at any age. So don't worry about whether or not it's an elderly person only, but a young person can suffer that same devastating stroke. So please notice. Check your loved ones and make sure you're aware of what they're doing.
That's great. And where are you coming from, Shar?
Yes, I am broadcasting this from GRTV, Grand Rapids, Michigan, a public TV station.
So as you can see, she was very heartfelt in her message. She really believes, as she said to me the first moment that we met each other on Zoom, that if she can help one person save one life, then her job is, complete. And Charlotte, I got to tell you, we had no idea that his 2-year anniversary is on Wednesday. When is the first?
I know it's coming up.
Yeah, the first is coming up. So once again, it's really the work that you're doing for your husband in honor of him is really prominent, and we want to thank you for joining us and really for speaking about it.
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, and the truth is that, you're honoring him. This is going to touch the world, this show. We reach thousands and hundreds of people through this, the internet. So, I just want to say thank you from him to you for what you're doing.
Thank you. It's heartwarming, and I truly believe in helping with the awareness for everyone.
Yeah. So let's go back to your love story, because that's what people want to hear. We just heard of your husband's stroke. We'll get back to that in a little bit. But tell us where you guys met and the love story. You guys were married, you told me, for 63 years. I mean, that's incredible.
That's correct. And we met in Detroit at a wedding. We stood up to a wedding for friends. I did not know Tom at the time, met him the day before a Polish wedding that we were both asked to represent and stand up for the bride and groom. We enjoyed each other midpoint. You know, Polish weddings are all day long festivities. So we met the day before at the practice at the church. In fact, the church steps we were married at.
Ah.
And it was my childhood church. And the next morning, we danced after breakfast. And at one point, I was dancing with the women to the polkas. And he asked me to dance. And I thought, well, it's better than dancing with the girls, I guess. I'll dance with them. And it turned out that we discussed our future the next morning because he asked me to go to church with him.
Oh.
And we shared our goals in life, and I began to be attracted to him. And be honest with you, I was attracted to his convertible car he was driving.
What kind of convertible was it?
It was a Ford convertible, and the sun was shining, and I loved convertibles, so that was a plus on his side. I began to understand his background. He served in the military 4 years as a Navy corpsman, and he was dispatched with the H-35 Marines on the front lines in Korea at the mortar division. And very, very fortunate to survive because a lot of corpsmen were targets at the time. A story he told me, though, I'd like to share.
Sure.
About the wartime. He didn't speak often about his role, but he told me that there was a gentleman, a fellow Marine, who was injured, and he was able to give him, I guess it's albumin, I believe, to get him out of shock. And
what's albumin? Is it a medical?
Yes, I think it's a medical liquid that you have to put in a vein of someone who's going into shock.
Okay.
And he revived him and sent him to the hospital ship. And he received a thank you back from another Marine who said, "Thank you, Doc." And Tom was so thrilled that he was able to help him. That was one memory of his that he remembered 50 years later. Unfortunately, that soldier passed away on the ship going home, but it represented his sensitivity to his fellow man and to the Marines he served with. In fact, on his covering of the cemetery closure, he's in a columbarium now, and it reads, "Corpsman up, God is calling, Semper Fi."
Wow.
So,
and look at all the medals that you have behind you.
I do. And we enjoyed 63 years. I followed him around the country. We went to, as soon as I graduated from Wayne State University, we drove a drive-away car with whatever little belongings we had to California because he was in the service out there and he thought it was a good place to put our roots down. So we were in California for 1 year. We came back to out east and we settled in Indiana, Elkhart, Indiana, where Tom was a morning man, very successful. He was quite a giant in Elkhart, Indiana, in the radio business.
Wow.
And eventually Grand Rapids opened up in the WGRD station. They hired him as a morning man as well. And so in talking to him, I said, we've traveled a lot. We have 3 children now. They were all born in Indiana. And I said, we need to settle down. And so we put our roots down in Grand Rapids. Comstock Park is the actual name.
Wow. Wow. So what type of radio broadcasting did Tom do?
Well, he loved music, and he loved big band music, but he also loved polkas because we're Polish. and he was actually hired here in Grand Rapids to take over a polka show that another DJ did very well at, but he no longer could broadcast, so Tom took over. Tom also had a teen dance group that he offered to the area teens several years when he was working in the area. At the Armory, the Grand Rapids Armory. So he was very fond of young people. As a matter of fact, in touching on his sports love, when he could no longer play, and even before then, he would go to the local high school and keep stats for the baseball team. He would show up in his walker when he finally realized that that was his future in needing support in walking. And he would go up this incline to the baseball field and keep stats for them and give some advice to some of the players.
Wow.
In fact, they called him lovingly, "Hey, Polish, tell me what to do, or, give me an idea of what I'm doing wrong." And so, yeah, in fact, there's a plaque, 2013, the Comstock Park team won their title, and they have the team picture on this plaque, and they had my husband sit in front of the team on that plaque.
Wow, that's incredible.
So,
that's incredible. And you know what, the fact that he didn't, we're going to talk about his depression, because I know you mentioned that prior.
yes.
But the fact that even though he was feeling those feelings of depression, he was still, he still had this little urge in him to be an example for everyone and to share with them the gift of health we were talking about before. And he still wanted to be a part of that team. Even if it wasn't the way that it could be before, he still wanted to be a part of that team. And to me, that's so honorable. It's so honorable of him.
And I can feel the pride in your voice and in your story that you have for him, and your love, your deep love.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention too that he mentored in the sports field all ages. As a matter of fact, he would organize local seniors like himself prior to his problems to practice once a week. And they started a senior league. And when he could no longer play after the strokes, we would drive to the ballpark and he would sit in the car and watch the buddies play or practice. And then eventually he got brave enough, or gumption enough, I guess. He brought his walker outside the car and stood against the car to watch.
Wow.
Eventually, he walked up the walkway to the ballparks. There were there were 4 of them. And I joked with him. I said, you know what? Just go out in the field and stand in the corner of the fence and have him throw the ball to you. And if it goes beyond, just let it go, but catch it. He never did that, but yeah, he did eventually be brave enough in his thoughts to go to support them and let them know that he still longed to play, but was no longer able.
That's so moving. It's very moving because I can understand it. Like, I know my love for the game. And I'll never forget when I was the first in my book, my first book, I talk about getting hit in the head playing softball. That was the first time that God tried to get my attention. And I don't think I ever spoke about this on the show before. But when I went to the hospital and then came back out of the hospital, and we had a parade, and they didn't want me to walk in the parade. And I wanted to be a part of the team. I wanted to go on that parade because everybody was supposed to be in that parade, and I was a part of the team.
I know how determined you are. Nobody could stop you from anything.
Right. So my dear friend, Michelle, who was on another team, like we were so bonded and close, they got a wheelchair and they pushed me in the wheelchair in the parade. So I wanted to be, but like your husband, I still had this urge to be this longing. There's more of a word, proper word, to be with the team, no matter what I needed to do. And then I couldn't play. So my softball coach, Pat, made me coach first. I wasn't allowed to play for 3 games. I was like livid. I never missed a game. I was always there, hours before the game would start, sitting on the bench saying, where is everybody else? Anyway, so I understand it. I get it. And then after my stroke, I couldn't sing for 2 years. So that was devastating as well, not to be able to share. Could you imagine, not being able to
How were you able to get back your singing voice? Did you have to go to a speech therapist? Did you have to go?
No, Judy, I don't remember back then, but I don't think I did. I think just through the drive, because, we always talk about, people suffering strokes. And Charlie, you'll be able to confirm what we're saying, that as much as the person on the outside loves the person that suffered the stroke, there's really not much you can do but support them going through it. They're the ones that have to drive the car and learn how to get your speech back, get your singing voice back, get your physical body back. And sometimes it doesn't come back in to the way it was before. Sometimes it's a new road you got to go down. But
it's loving them through it, which is one of your new books that you're writing at the moment.
Yeah, I really believe that you just have to love them through it, like Charlotte. Charlotte, tell us a little bit about his, and we spoke about his Tom's inability to physically, but let's talk about his speech. That is so prominent. We talk about aphasia. Aphasia is one of our big topics that we talk about all the time, because people don't really correlate strokes with aphasia. They know people with strokes that have speech problems, but they don't understand what those problems are. So could you tell us a little bit about your Tom's speech problem?
Yes.
Impairment?
Yes. And actually, that was the first time I realized that a stroke would affect speech. As I said, that was my first indication that he was in the midst of a stroke with his speech limitation. But after it was diagnosed, after the stroke, it was very apparent that it affected the way he talked. And we did go to a Mary Free Bed Hospital. It's a rehab hospital here in Grand Rapids. And he did meet with a speech pathologist. And it was kind of interesting that I recall is they were giving him various types of food he thought they were just giving him snacks, but what they were doing was evaluating his swallowing.
Right.
And then also they began to talk about speech therapy. And my prideful husband, he said, I have all of these speech exercises. He said, and which he did because before a job, I mean, he was a perfectionist in his job, in commercials, etc. And he would go through some speech exercises for his throat, so he was clear and precise and could do a job very well. So he refused any more speech therapy, but
Wow.
he should have gotten some. Actually, my voice has changed a bit because of open heart surgery. And the voice vocal cord, one of the vocal cords was injured a bit with the intubation. So that happens a lot in strokes as well.
Yes. Yes. So tell us a little bit about your career path. Like, I know you said you were an artist. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, I grew up knowing from the very young that an artistic career was my goal. And I grew up in Detroit. I was able to be encouraged by an elementary teacher, a high school teacher, and a college teacher. And I was encouraged to follow a teaching career. I had already worked at several major department stores when I was at college and even high school. I was working at downtown Detroit Woolworths, Crowley's, and Hudson's. Those are some big stores that were very prominent in the Detroit area. But the teaching career, the high school instructor said, I'd like you to try for this scholarship at Wayne State University. And I decided that I would do that and won the scholarship. Actually, several through the years. Wayne State was so good to me, informing me of scholarships I can try. And I was able to go through 3 years with scholarships. I had one set for the last year, but I met my husband at that wedding, and we were married before my senior year.
How long did you know him, Tom?
11 months.
Wow.
We dated 11 months before that. But it was interesting. The college withdrew that scholarship because I was married.
Wow.
But I was determined. I took out a loan, small loan myself, and I finished school. And then that's where our travels began. And I taught in a school in California, Santa Fe Springs, as a matter of fact, and then several schools in Elkhart. All the while in Elkhart, while I was having children, I was still teaching every other year.
Wow.
And loving it. It was my home away from home. And then I began teaching at Sparta High School in the Grand Rapids area. And I taught 27 and a half years total. And I'm so grateful because I live in this area and I get to see my students who are now grandparents and parents and see their children and hear from them on I bless the computer because I hear from them and their successes. In fact, one of them just emailed a statement that I caught on the Facebook that her student said, "You're the best teacher ever, art teacher that I had." And I congratulated her, and she wrote back a similar affirmation of my influence. So I'm so fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. I find the same thing because I coached softball for 25 years. And when I run into those, they're not kids anymore, but when I run into my athletes, my team players, and now they're parents, like, I'm like, what happened to the time? Right. It's scary. And, and then they say the same thing to me, what an inspirational coach I was. But, I always feel like without them being open and willing to hear the teachings, so it's all about them. It really is all about them. I feel that it's all about them, and so it's such an honor. It's such an honor. I can imagine how you feel about your students. It's perfect.
Oh, that is so true. And I'm just so happy for them that we all need inspiration. We all need a mentor and a kind word. And it's amazing. One word can make or break a child or an adult. And 50, 60 years later, they remember the injury or the happiness, one or the other, and they pass it on. I always tell them, thanks for passing on the torch of inspiration.
That's a good
Charlotte, you talked about your heart attack. Can you share with us how Tom was your caregiver and what happened?
Yes. Well, one of them, though, when Tom was in the midst of his problem, which actually it was 20 years, going back and looking at details that we were searching, but about the 10th year, and he was diagnosed then with one stroke and the other one was looming. I was so concerned of his health that one day he went to bed and I sat on the couch and I began to feel the jaw pain that women feel for a stroke.
Were you aware? I knew it. You were aware of that jaw pain? Yes.
I sat down on the couch, but it was late at night. To be honest with you, I did something no one should do. I decided no one could take me to the hospital, so I just decided to just ignore it and go to bed. Well,
the last thing you should do is go to sleep when you're having those signs.
Exactly. Well, the next morning I did have a doctor appointment, so that was one reason I thought, I'll just wait. Well, she admonished me, of course. All right, then in 2017, actually September 17, 2017, we were ready to go to church. Tom was in the car. He made it out there himself. I was going to drive. I stood by the car. And these are things now that he's telling me because I don't remember. I told him, I think I need an aspirin.
Wow.
He got out of the car, took me 6 feet back into the house, put the aspirin bottle in front of me, and he said, there's your aspirin. And I said, I don't see it. I can't see it. And I asked him later how I got back out to the car. So we switched roles. He then was going to drive me. He could drive. So he said, by hand, I made it out to the car because he was in no condition to pick me up if I fell. So he drove me to one hospital, Blodgett, in Grand Rapids. Apparently, they put me on another ambulance or a ambulance screaming downtown Grand Rapids to the heart center. And within the hour, I had open heart surgery.
Wow.
Yeah. He sent me by myself, though. I was saying to him, what'd you do? Just send me along and they get a body and say, what do we do with this one? But I do remember the doctor bringing me back just enough to hear, do you want me to fix it? And I responded, yes. And what had happened is my 6 inches of my aorta had to be replaced.
Wow.
And
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I
I don't
survived.
understand why he would say, do you want me to fix it? Of course, that's the reason you're there, to fix it.
Yeah. But no one was there to speak for me at that moment. You know, Tom
So what year did Tom have his strokes in?
he had
His
his
first
stroke in 2014 and 15.
2014.
Both
So this
of
was 3 years after his stroke.
Correct.
His
Right. So then when I did go to Mary Free Bed, well, it was a whole month almost then of recuperation. 2 weeks in the hospital. I went to Mary Free Bed for rehab. And then I was home and Tom was able to help me get back on my feet. And then we could switch roles again. But my last recollection, I need to tell you this. It was Thanksgiving morning, his last Thanksgiving, which was 2018. And he knew I loved the Macy's Day Parade. I always watched it on television. And I would draw sometimes what I saw on television as well. He waited till I watched the entire parade, which ended at noon. And then he fixed breakfast for me. Even though he was a little unstable, he was still frying eggs and bacon, and he fixed that breakfast for me. And then he could watch his ball games. And
Football games.
yes, and it was so meaningful to me to know that he knew what I loved, and he allowed me to have that moment and waited and cooked for me.
Wow.
So yeah. So
beautiful memories. Beautiful memories. Beautiful memories. And you know, you brought up something really important throughout this discussion. Fast is usually what people use for knowing the signs of a stroke. The face is F, A is the arms, S is the smile or speech, and T is time. But there's really 2 more pieces to that now. They say be fast. And you brought up that Tom, his balance was off, and that was really one of the prominent signs that something was wrong and he really needed to go to the hospital. You said that in your video that we showed, that if anybody has a problem with balance, you really need to pay attention to it. The other thing was, just now you spoke of your heart attack, because heart attacks and strokes are tied together. That's why the American Stroke Association, the American Heart Association also is the American Stroke Association. So you said that your vision, eyes, so it's be fast is the new stroke awareness, for people to always remember. So it's be fast, not fast anymore. And you really tie that in without even knowing of the new terminology. Did you know that they changed it to be fast?
No, I didn't. No.
Yeah, yeah. And you were talking about that, and that's so important for everybody to realize and to remember. Right, Judy? That's
Yes.
and Ginny's doctor is the first one to have brought it to our attention, and the second one is Dr. Beculus, who is connected
Yes.
to our organization.
So while you were in the hospital and you were being, after the operation, Tom was taking care of you and then he fell.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Actually, what happened the last week of his life, he was determined that he wanted to spend Thanksgiving with my son in Florida.
Wow.
And I kept trying to tell him, let's just drive, let's meet halfway. No, he was insistent that he wanted to be at his house. So we did fly direct. We drove to Toledo and flew direct to Sarasota, or Tampa, actually. We were at my son's house for 3 days. We were ready to fly back that same morning that this happened. 3 a.m, Tom got up. He did use his walker, but 6 feet beyond where the bed was, I heard this big clunk, and the walker was on its side when I rushed up, and he had hit his head on the floor and started a brain bleed. Well, I realized that he was knocked out somewhat and coming back, and I ran to get my son, and he helped him up and talked with him and all. And I told my son, I said, this is bigger than we can handle. Call the ambulance. And with that, they called the ambulance. Well, he called him immediately. He was there. They were going to airlift my husband to Tampa. Well, first of all, they took him to a smaller Zephyr Hills hospital. And at that hospital, they were talking about airlifting him, but it was 3:30 in the morning and the fog was too thick to fly. So I rode with him. I said, I'm coming in that ambulance. And we arrived at the Tampa hospital. And at the time, they're asking me for his, I had all his health records, but they said, well, what's his social security number? And I said, I didn't write it down, but I said, oh, he knows his social security number. Well, Tom was kind of propped up a little on the gurney, and the attendant said, Tom, what's your social security number? And he gave it.
Wow.
That was the last thing he said.
Oh my God.
They took him in to relieve the pressure in the brain. And what they did say was, like I said, he didn't say anything and couldn't after. But the doctor said 2 things that I kind of hold dear. One, he told a nurse who related to me that if it's his time to go, he'd like to go that way. So what that told me was Tom wasn't in pain. Right. The other thing is that he said Tom was so smart. He said normally people's brains shrink and they have room for the blood to go into this cranium. He said his brain was so large it filled the whole cranium and it had no place to go. He was so smart. So those 2 things I knew he was smart, but then it was confirmed. But
So he passed in Tampa, not even in the state. He wanted to see your son so bad. He
yes,
really wanted to say goodbye to your son. Could you, I mean, that is so honorable
yeah,
that he got on a plane. He didn't even want to drive because I think maybe he knew internally. And
I
my,
believe that too.
sometimes like I mean, he probably didn't know he was going to pass, but something was telling him he needed to do this. He needed to
yeah, there was no way I was going to stop him from getting there. So, but yeah, it was quite, uh,
He loved you very, very much.
Yeah. What a
And
love
you loved
story.
him. The love is so, this is a love story.
yeah.
You should write a book, Charlotte.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good idea.
Should write a
Uh,
book and then you could put you could draw some of your visions. I
yeah,
mean, that would really be an honorable a legacy,
yeah.
for you and your husband, your love story.
Well, let me tell you, speaking about a drawing, I did draw him in the hospital bed as he was lying there. And as an artist, I could remove some of the tubes and things. But the morning that we were going to remove the intubation, and most likely he wasn't going to survive. We knew, we were told, and he was in hospice by then. I drew looking out the window of the hospital across his body. I drew what I saw of the light coming up because it was early in the morning. And one of the attendants, the nurse attendant, the male nurse, when he came in and he saw what I was doing, and it was barely light coming at the lower level because the sun was rising, but he said to me, "Stand up." And I said, "What?" He said, "Stand up." And I stood up and I looked to my right, and there was more of a glorious sunrise coming. I didn't change my drawing, but I just thought that was so insightful of that young orderly to be part of my goodbye.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I was talking to you about before, when I was in the ICU with my father for 2 weeks, and it's a whole different world. And really the hospitals and the nurses and the nurse practitioners and just everybody who is working that area is so they're in a different, they really are from in my world, sent from God to be there, and an orderly, that spoke to you like that. He was meant to be there to give you some comfort and to point that out. And it's so incredible how the work that they do. And because I'll never forget when my father, on Easter morning, my father, he was in the hospital. On that Saturday evening, I went by him, and he wrote, he was intubated, and he wrote on a piece of paper, "Have a nice Easter." And I said, "What do you mean, have a nice Easter? We're coming to," he was writing it. I said, "We're going to spend it with you." And then they took the tube out, and then he was sitting with his wife, and he ate a huge meal. She said, like, he just kept eating and eating and eating. And then so we thought he was on his road to recovery. The next morning I got a phone call. I was in church. I got a phone call that I needed to go run to the hospital. My father wasn't going to make it. So we went to the hospital, and myself, my sister, and his wife were all there. And I don't remember if we saw him. I think we saw him, and then we came out, and then he had another attack. I guess it was another heart attack. And we had to make that decision that we weren't going to save him. And, we made that decision. But while that was happening, the whole hospital team, support team, was surrounding us. And they were there to do their God work. I mean, could you imagine doing this every day, to be there for families that they know it's going to be the last moment with? It really is honorable.
Some
And
people decide to work in hospice for that reason. They want to be there to
oh my
give
God,
guidance and love.
Yeah.
Before we run out of time, I wanted Charlotte to talk about her titles.
Yes.
Her Ms. Super Senior Michigan, USA.
Yes, I'm very honored to represent Michigan. I did go to Las Vegas and participated in the current Miss Super Senior. Actually, it's Miss Super Senior Michigan. And I participated in Miss Super Senior USA. And I was fortunate with my artwork to get first runner up. So I'm extremely happy, and I'm so
But there
proud.
are a lot of categories, and you want to discuss the different categories?
Right. And in my case, it's the age level. You have to be 70 or 75, and I'm 85.
You
and
look terrific.
Incredible.
Thank you.
You look incredible. And
I would like to say one thing, though, that in my philosophy, you have to have philosophy, and sometimes
Philosophy
it's hard to pull everything to one or two sentences. But I would say, along with God, we define our destiny. And I truly believe that.
You and Tom have been what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it right now, but you've been an example for the love story, the support, the life experiences that you need to get through life together. And really, but the love story is so prominent in your story. And the truth is that sometimes it doesn't need to be a husband and wife. It could be a mother and daughter. It can be, sisters, or it could be, or friends, but the love is really the important key to getting through this life on earth. Life is challenging,
And your love shines through so vividly, strongly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Charlotte, we want to give you a moment to really wind things around. And, and of course, we're not, this is not the end with our relationship with bringing stroke awareness. You're a part of the team now, part of the family. But what at this particular moment would you like to wrap this up and share with our audience?
Well, there are two things that come to mind. One is that my husband was called a real hero by a young Marine when he was attending a Purple Heart celebration for another Marine that he was able to get that significance for. But the other thing is that we all rely on each other. Once we're not able to be fully control of our lives, we rely on our loved ones to help us. And I've told my daughter several times, thank you for not giving up on me when I was laying in that hospital and it could have been do or die. And I was not given a whole lot of hope to pull through. And I am called a miracle by the doctors. So you can't give up on your loved ones. You need to. Someone said to me from church, a church member said, "What do you want him to live forever?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" As best we can, but always check with what your loved ones are doing, and notice the effects of a stroke and the symptoms, because they'll come in the night, in the day, and in the morning to everyone.
And there's no discrimination in strokes. It can touch anybody in any age, any religion, any color. It's not discriminatory.
From an unborn baby through childhood, adulthood, teenagers, adults, seniors, anybody could have a stroke.
Yes.
At any moment.
Yes.
So you have to be aware of the signs.
Yeah. And we want to bring reminder that it's be fast. Like Charlotte had mentioned, it's balance, it's eyes, it's fast, F for face, A for arms, S for speech or smile, and T for time, which is the most important thing. And our foundation always adds in a really important piece to that. When you do call 911, you need to tell them it could be a stroke, because they will go into stroke mode. They will know what to look for, or be aware of something when they're on their way. And they'll set up the hospital once they come and visualize for themselves that this could be a stroke. They will call triage, which is in the hospital, and you will not stop at triage. You will go right past if they see that that's what's happening. You'll go right past triage, and you will go to for a CAT scan, which is a really important piece, because you got to stay within that 4.5 hour window. And honestly, if somebody starts having those symptoms, just call 911. Tell them that someone could be suffering a stroke, and take it from there. Let the professionals do what they do best. So,
you girls are amazing.
Oh, thank you, Charlotte.
You're the one that's amazing.
Yes, I was just going to say
I
that.
just want to come through the screen and hug you, Charlotte.
I need that.
So we hope that one day, all these wonderful people that we're meeting, hopefully one day when we all can meet again, we can all come together and really have this grand ball. And I was telling Judy the other day, and then we have to go because we're running late. That, I always prayed to have a concert at
one of the big stadiums,
a Yankee Stadium, to sing. So, maybe we could do that. Maybe we could rent out the Yankee Stadium. I could have a concert, and we can have everybody there.
I can draw. I'll come and do a demonstration.
So, but you know what, Charlotte, we'll talk about possibly you drawing something for the foundation. And we actually, this is really good. We're actually thinking about making cards. Maybe a little of your artistic ability would come in very handy.
Wonderful.
And also we have a boutique online. We just started it within the last month, an online boutique where a portion of the proceeds helps the foundation to bring awareness. So that would be wonderful if you could become a part of that.
I'd love to.
And Charlotte, I'll be giving you a call within a day or two, because I want to further this discussion and discuss booking you again.
Okay. Wonderful.
We have to go because, of course, we're running late, but we always have so much to talk about. What can I tell you? And thank you, Jim. Thank you for always dealing with
Thank you, Jim.
So we're going to roll out, and then we have another wonderful show with one of our committee board members, Catherine, who has a story about her grandmother, her mother, and her suffering some form of a stroke. So it's really an important show to watch, as this one was as well. Charlotte, we love you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Judy, thank you so much for, everything you do for the show and for the foundation. We couldn't do it without
Thank
you.
you.
You're such a vital piece. Jim,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for always doing what you do. We're going to blow our kisses and then
Okay.
we'll be right back in a few minutes. Here we go on 3. 1, 2, 3. Bye, everybody. See you in a few.
I love you. God bless you.
Bye.